Before we get to the mysterious lady statues, let's get our timeline straight. The European Stone Age, or Paleolithic, if you want to get technical, lasted a long time from around 2.5 million years ago to about 10,500 years ago. The way it's usually broken up is by looking at categories of material culture stuff that people made. Within those categories of material culture, we don't see any depictions of people until around 33,000 years ago in what's called the Gravettian culture. The people responsible for the Gravettian culture made the first examples of what are commonly known as Venus figurines. The most famous of these figurines is the Venus of Willendorf, found in Austria in 1908. It was carved out of a type of rock called Oolitic limestone. Oolitic means roughly made out of egg shapes. The type of stone is important because it's not a type that is local to Willendorf. Comparing samples from different Oolitic limestone has led researchers to believe that it originated near Brno, in what is today the Czech Republic. That means either the raw material or the completed statue was brought to Willendorf from nearly 200 kilometers away. Also, the statuette was painted with red ochre, which is best preserved among the ridges of its hair details. As far as its age, the figurine cannot be dated directly, but radiocarbon dating of samples taken from the same layer suggests that it was carved around 25,000 years ago. So what do these figurines look like, and what do they have to do with Venus? With the exception of one or two that frankly look more like potatoes than people, most of these figurines are small, a few inches in length, and take the form of very curvy women. This is where the Venus part comes in, and we aren't talking about the planet. As a refresher, Venus was the Roman goddess of erotic love, beauty, and fertility. Connecting these lady-shaped figurines with Venus is what we call an a priori assumption. What evidence is there that these represented a goddess, much less one that has anything to do with sex or fertility, or that says something about ideals of physical beauty? Perhaps a better name, according to some scholars, is woman figurines. Figurines with a feminine shape are found in lots of different places, not just in Austria. This suggests either a similar idea spread far and wide, or several different ideas that resulted in the same type of material creation. Excavations of a Neolithic town at Çatalhöyük in what is today Turkey have yielded many figurines. One that stands out is that of a seated woman flanked by two animals and dated to around 6000 BCE. The figure was initially interpreted as an Earth Mother controlling the forces of creation, life, and death, but that's shifting. People on the tiny Mediterranean island of Malta produced a lot of Neolithic material culture around 3000 BCE. The artistic repertoire featured obese female figurines and statues, although in fact their gender is not always clear. They are associated with megalithic structures generally seen as centers of worship, thus suggesting that these figures had something to do with religion. Around 3800 BCE, on the island of Cyprus, a highly distinctive cultural tradition shows up with human representations in pottery and stone. Some figurines are recognizably pregnant or giving birth, so it's often argued that they signify fertility or at least childbearing. So these figures seem to have different significance depending on where they come from. There are many theories concerning their purpose, and most of those theories lump them together as a single group of objects. But these were produced over the course of about 20,000 years in lots of different places by different groups of people. It's a pretty big assumption to claim that everyone who carved a woman figurine had exactly the same thing in mind. But that hasn't stopped scholars from trying to figure out what they mean. They might be symbolic objects related to marriage or mating partners, and the importance of ensuring the continuation of populations in the inhospitable climate and scarce resources of the Ice Age world. So, kind of prehistoric Tinder profiles. They might be toys or educational models in case people were curious about the female form. Another theory suggests that they might be totems related to fertility or pregnancy. Many responses to this theory make a good point that womanhood and fertility are not synonymous, which pushes back against the original assumptions that gave the figurines the descriptor of Venus. in the first place. There's an additional thought that these might be self-portraits of women by women. This idea is mostly based on the fact that the figurines tend to curve outwards at the torso and taper inwards to tiny feet. So if a woman were looking down at her own body, based on perspective, those are the proportions she might see. But who knows? We sure don't. What we can say is that these curvy feminine figures have been found at a number of archaeological sites. That means that the symbolism of the female form meant something to the people who made them. What we can't say is that the symbolism was the same for every person or every social group who created one of these figurines. We may never know for sure what each of those Paleolithic artists had in mind, but these are intriguing clues into how ancient people perceived the human body, particularly the female body. And now let's get weird for a minute. Let's talk about the Mother Goddess. While we will never know for certain whether Our Lady of Willendorf and her associates were intended to represent deities in antiquity, they sure have been interpreted as exactly that in modernity. For our purposes, it all starts in 1861 with a man named Johann Jakob Bachofen, the father of matriarchy theory. Let's say he laid down some theories of prehistoric matriarchy in his book Das Mutterrecht. That's the short version. The actual full title translated into English is Mother Right, an investigation of the religious and juridical character of matriarchy in the ancient world. Anyway, Bachofen proposed that in the good old days of the hunter-gatherers in the Paleolithic, people first worshipped an earth deity, something like a proto-Aphrodite. When agriculture came around, Bachofen proposed that people shifted to a matriarchal form of worship focused on an earth mother goddess, and maybe including the moon in there too. Next came the emergence of patriarchy, and gradually solar worship overtook lunar worship. The patriarchy overtook the matriarchy, and modern civilization emerged. It's certainly a way to look at things, but it's also probably not really true. We hope we've presented you with an intriguing puzzle in the form of these figurines, and we hope we've shown how the interpretation of archaeological materials can change over time depending on who's studying them.